So in this video, this is going to be a sort of like a paint over critique for one of my students, and the idea is here how we can push a rendered image that we already done, how we can push it further and going more into analyzing what we have on the image and figure out the things that are working, the things that are not working, and how we can address those things to make it a little bit better. A lot of this stuff is readability, right? Controlling the values with lighting that you have going on, how you can add new elements to your scene or your structure in order to make it more believable, and also how to maybe fix some designs and some things that maybe are subconsciously need to be there in for whether it's for the gameplay or the animation in order to make the space look like it could work and it looks believable. And so when we're doing environment design, we want to make sure that without putting any characters, that there is character to the environment. And so I'll go through some of the major things that need to be fixed with the image that we will show you, and also how to fix them and how to think about those things every single time that you create an environment piece. I hope you enjoyed. Okay, so the idea here is how we can maybe push this a little bit more if we have to, right? And so there's a couple of things that I always sort of go through when I'm in a situation like this where I have an image and I'm like, okay, how we can push it. And so I always like to sort of observe what's happening and see what could be done. And I'm gonna sort of point these out, not in particular order, but just as I see them. And so the first thing that I want to address is, you have this really strong light coming from here. And I'm not 100% always against like lens flares and things like that, but in the same situation where you have this, you also have the sort of like particles effect going around in here and here and here, right? Plus all that. And so what I want to make sure is that we don't depend on those to finish the image. These should be used very sparingly and almost like as the last thing that you want to add if it adds something to the image. You don't want to depend on these things to separate the elements from closer to the camera to further away from the camera, right? From here to here. And so you always want to depend on the values of those objects to do that. And these sort of effects should be sort of like icing on the cake, okay? And so for example, you have this really strong light source here where it's not really clear where that is coming from. Now I'm guessing it's coming from here, but again, you have this whole wall here, which we should have with this such a strong light, we should have a very strong cast shadow from that wall into this area here, right? Because this light is so bright the way you have it right now. And so adjacent to that, when I look at the image, we have two really strong almost focal points because of the contrast that you got going on with the lighting, right? You have this going on here and this going on here. And so what I want to do is I want to decide which one is going to dominate and which one is going to be more subtle, because you cannot have both of them fight like this for attention, right? And so that's the other thing. Now, the next thing that I would say is I do like what's happening, like compositional wise, like the way that you're placing objects, I think it's fine. Like I think it's working, right? So I'm not too concerned about that. The other thing is that you have this sand on the ground, right? Which is part of the natural environment where this place is, right? But we also got to think about how this sand will behave in a place like this, right? So if this is, let's say, like a game where people are running in and out and going around finding cover, doing things in this machine, and this machine is actually getting used and all this, right? There's going to be a lot of movement in certain areas where the sand is not going to be as prevalent, right? So for example, I can take a look at this entrance here for this machine, which I'm assuming that it works because it's turned on. I'm assuming that it takes it gets used often maybe. And so this area here should be more cleared of sand because people are going to walk in and out from here often. And so maybe the sand gets accumulated more in these areas where people don't go as much, right? And the same thing is going to be for pathways in the environment, right? So if we take a look at, for example, trails on a mountain, animals walk normally on the same path every day, and so you will see natural trails on the mountains because animals pass over there constantly through the same path. And so we'll see something similar happen in here. So I want to clear some of the sand to portray that there's some paths here that maybe the players can take, and they do take throughout their gameplay of the thing, right? So I don't want to put the sand arbitrarily in places, right? I want to think about what's happening in the scene, or what the things that will happen on the scene as well. And so another thing that I noticed that I think we could do a little bit more up here, right? If this is, I was looking at some facilities, right? And this might be too industrial to what you're going for, right? But the concept or the idea is the same, where, we want to utilize and make it functional, the space all the way from the ground up all the way to the ceiling, right? And so if I look at some of these, we can see that there's some functionality into the ceilings of this stuff, whatever it is that you put in there, right? And so that's going to bring a little bit more of interest into your environment. And I know that when we look at this area obviously is going to be quite dark, like the way it is, right, because of the light that is lacking here. But we can sort of simulate or give the impression that there's stuff going on in here, right? So maybe, for example, let's clear this up. So for example, we could have some sort of like pipes going into the background here, right? Maybe ones are going maybe some up, some side to side, right? Maybe these pipes gotta carry water or sprinkles for if there's any fire or something like that. Maybe it could be AC conduct into here, right? We could also add some sort of like maybe some sort of AC grill here, right? Because this place obviously needs some air flowing through the space, right? We could have some of those on the ceilings here, right? We could have signs maybe around, right? We could also have I think one of the things lacking up here would be artificial light, right? So if there's no sun, right, if this is at nighttime, where are the lights that is going to light this place when it actually works before this whole thing happened, right? So maybe we could have some sort of artificial lighting system that lights this place. Maybe these go back and forth, right? And so that way, of course, it's not gonna be this controversy, but we're going to give the hint that there's those things that are functional happening in the space as well, right? And so those are the major things that I would do to this image. And now I did this is very quick paint over, just kind of illustrate those points. But you can see here where if I jump, if I zoom out and I jump back and forth, you can see the main thing I think is the control of the values, right? So I bring them together more to control how those values are, right? And from here I can, accentuate more or less wherever I need to. But you can see I clear a little bit of that sand in there. I control the values. I added some of the artificial lighting. I added some stuff here on the top, maybe some signage and some vents and stuff like that. Things that are more functional. They're not super exciting, but the as we layer all those things, I think it's gonna bring a level of believability into the space way more than if we didn't have it. And so subconsciously, when people see it, they're gonna notice and feel that this place actually works. And you can see that I also, let's bring a new layer here. I also added some details. So maybe I was thinking that maybe there was like a window back here. It's barely visible, right? But it breaks a little bit of that texture that you got going on as well. Brought a little bit of artificial lights in here from like monitors or things that are working in the background, right? Same thing back here. And so what I want to do is really control what's happening in the scene as much as possible. And so I always like to bring, and I do the values with a curves layer to control and bring together more the values, and then I can bump them up as needed. And so I also added some extra things on the ground, right? So if this is sort of like a place that is being reused, things are going to be out of place and placed in places where it didn't used to, but now they serve a new purpose, or they're like staggering them in the corner or something, right? There are things happening in the background that maybe we don't know exactly what's happening, but we know there's something happening, right? So we got some roof broken up, but there's some maybe cables hanging and stuff like that. And so we want to keep adding those things, those details, and layering them all together to bring that sort of believability into the image in itself. And so, and again, I'm trying to get rid of the lens flare as well as the noisy texture, right? And so I want to make sure that I don't depend on those to break things apart and separating them in space as well. Okay, so here's the before and after. Okay, so that was the paint over for one of my students. Again, I really hope that helps you in any way to how to even critique your own work every time you feel stuck in an image. If you want more information about my mentorship or my courses, make sure that you check the links in the description below. We have many courses that cover all these sort of things. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. See you in the next one.